and welcome to Pulp Mythos. I'm Brian here with Spencer, and we're discussing part 2 of the Fear Street Trilogy, 1978. If you've not hit the sub button, please do so. Hit the bell. We're going to be doing, well, we're doing all these, this whole trilogy, so we got one more next week. We have all kinds of other content on the channel. Check that out. Leave a like, leave a comment, and like the first one, man. I love this one. The first one taking place in the mid 90s, and of course that being the overarching story, so we got back to the 90s at the end. But this 1978 camp setting I thought was brilliantly done. It reminded me, not only, everybody's going to say, oh, Friday the 13th, and yes, it has, inspiration from that. There's an old slasher film called The Burning, and I got a lot of vibes of The Burning in this, specifically the willingness to kill young children, young campers, and also, doing the thing where you spend the bulk of the episode, introducing these characters and it being sort of lighthearted and fun, and then bam, just brutally killing a bunch of them. Very much enjoyed it. It pushed the story along more. You brought up some concerns, and we're going to go into those, but just your initial feelings towards the 1978 camp setting. How did you feel about this episode compared with the first one?
To me, the 1978 stuff is less in my wheelhouse as far as relatable instances and stuff, but I did go to a summer camp when I was a kid. So the summer camp aspect of it, the entire, giant capture the flag game, the music playing in the background, and I loved the setting of this one. I did like the 94 one. As far as just nostalgia and the vibe of the movie, but this one was scarier and more unsettling than the first one. I think the first one did a great job telling a story, and it was still, graphic and stuff, but this one stepped up the horror element to me quite a bit. And so far, and like you said, we'll talk about my concern, but they could not do it that way. But I've really enjoyed these first two a lot.
This continued the story of the rivalry, or the conflict or split between Shadyside and Sunnyvale, and it's highlighted even more so in this film because the camp is a mix of kids from both parts of town, and it's very interesting. And my sister actually texted me this and pointed this out. The killer in this film is Tommy Slater, who was in the first one. He was in the first part. He's the guy with the axe, and he never killed a Sunnyvale kid. He slaughtered like a dozen people, but not one of them was Sunnyvale. Very interesting, playing into sort of the suspicion that this curse somewhat protects Sunnyvale, or it's in their benefit.
Yeah, or targets Shadyside. Is either way, not affecting Sunnyvale.
So, this continues that, and like you said, that sort of the capture the flag, they have this color wars event when that's where all the killings take place at the Camp Nightwing, as it's called. But the central characters of this story, similar to the first one, it's siblings. The first film, it was Dina and Josh, brother and sister, and in this one we have sisters. We have Ziggy and Cindy Berman, and the whole movie we're assuming that the survivor was Cindy, that it was actually C. Berman. But we're introduced to the two sisters, and so the entire film I'm sitting there thinking, oh, Ziggy's going to die, and she develops this relationship, sort of a romance with the sheriff, who will become the sheriff, Nick Good, but that's not the case. In fact, in the end, Ziggy's the one who survives. I don't know how she survives with CPR from all those knife wounds. That was the only thing that slightly bothered me. I was like, that I don't know how you survived that in the way that she did, but she did.
Because the reason she would have died is because she bled out. And
exactly.
Pumping the heart, there's no more blood to be pumping around. So I'm not 100% sure how that would have worked. I mean, I'm sure CPR works in a lot of instances and doesn't in others, but I'm not sure how knife wounds would have affected the CPR. But when Cindy got hit in the chest with the axe over and over and over, that was pretty much the seal the deal thing for me. I was like, well,
there's no way in hell that she's alive. Yeah.
And I was like, well, she's not the one that's going to make it. So,
The that whole sequence I thought was amazing in terms of them
yeah.
going to the tree, the different murderers coming out of the woods, the two sisters being brutally killed together, the way the bodies were positioned, the whole thing. It was very nightmarish, and I thought it was really well done. Uh, Possibly my favorite sequence of the both films combined. Even though I think I like the first film a hair more, I think this scene was superior to any of the scenes in the first film.
And that's what I was saying. Like, the story part of the first movie, and it felt, I don't want to say Stranger Things because I liked both of these better than I liked Stranger Things, but similar to that, where it's, or Goonies or any of those kind of things where they're coming up with, it's like a
There
horror,
was some Goonies nods in this, and we'll get to that. I have a whole bunch of
but
notes on that.
that's what the first one felt like more to me. It was like a Goonies, a horror version of Goonies. And
Well,
then one to me had a lot more horror vibes. And like you said, that whole sequence where the kid's like walking with the bat, and I'm like, holy shit, there was a kid murderer too. Like, there's a serial killer with a kid with a mask and a baseball bat. And then I'm assuming the guy who stabbed Ziggy a bunch was like pedophilic or something. It was, or he gave me a really uncomfortable vibe when he was like licking the blood off of her and like smelling her and stuff. It When you talk about like nightmarish, it was very unsettling, and it to me was a great horror movie.
going to the Goonies references, they end up underneath the the
Yeah,
camp, and basically it's all these different cave systems. And a bulk of the film, Cindy and Alice are under there, and Alice's boyfriend Arnie is brutally murdered by Tommy, and at this point Tommy is possessed and he's up doing his thing. But yeah, you have all this cave systems, and it all leads to this sort of, I don't know, witches mark thing that's being used to possess people and all that. But very Goonies, they find the map, which, Goonies. The way they're trying to escape is through, instead of a well, a shitter, but they put a bucket down to
but
try and pull them up.
there's a reference in Goonies.
So yeah, like a lot of that, I was like, huh, that had to all be intentional, and I thought it was fun little nods to the Goonies without being a direct Goonies ripoff.
Oh, I agree. There's aspects of it and to me, a good horror movie has you laughing at points because it kind of, that mood shift uh, kind of keeps you on your toes. Like, you don't know what's going to happen next. You kind of shift your like mood a little bit, and then all of a sudden it gets really uneasy again. So to me, those kind of aspects of it were a great job of keeping you off guard.
Now, I didn't have the time, or I didn't take the time to look this up. So Sheila is sort of warring with Ziggy the whole film. They hate each other. Sheila's from Sunnyvale, Ziggy's from Shadyside, and she plays a prank on. They both prank each other, and it's the whole thing. Is Sheila named in the first film? Because I started thinking, what was Sam's mom's name? Like, I'm like thinking of all potential characters that, like, why did they spend so much time on this character? Was she named in the first film, or maybe not? Maybe she wasn't at all. But that got me thinking, and I didn't take the time to actually look, because we
Well,
do. Nick Good is in fact the sheriff.
I think that that could be because when you think of Sam's mom, she would have to almost have got pregnant right afterwards because 94 to 78 is only 16 years. So for Sam to be as old as she was, um, but her mom came from Sunnyvale. Like, there was
Yeah.
some that kind of thing. And for her to be terrified of Dina, in the mid 90s, their sexuality probably wouldn't have been as accepted as easily as it is today. But her reaction to Dina gave me a different vibe than just she didn't approve of who her daughter was dating. And I think, that being a nod to perhaps she was one of the people from the camp, uh, wouldn't be a bad, and it would raise more of a concern because she was just like you mentioned earlier, your sister said it was only the Shady Side people getting attacked. So if all the Sunnyvale kids that lived would be like, holy shit, Shady Side's full of murderers and dangerous people. So her daughter falling in love with some kid from Shady Side would be a, you know, gay or not, would give her a huge, concern because of what she lived through at camp. So she could be a camper. I don't know necessarily that she'd be Sheila, but I think that her mom probably, Sam's mom, does know. And I think that would be kind of cool if in the last film, Sam's was basically tied up in a bathroom, if she came out and was like, hey, I want to try and help. But who knows?
Similar to the first film, we had Simon and Kate, who were sort of part of the story and both murdered. In this film, we have Alice and Arnie. Arnie dies pretty quick, so he's one. I think, oh shit, he's the first death if I'm not mistaken. So he's out quickly, but Alice is in the entire film until the very end, and then she has her little moment where she's with the girls, with the sisters, and then she gets brutally killed. So if don't be friends with siblings in the Fear Street trilogy, because you're gonna end up dying at some point. But I thought, yet again, all the characters I thought were served their purpose, and I thought it worked.
Well, and same kind of thing. When we talked about in the first movie, we were unsure whether or not R.L. Stine would become a hard R movie, but even the deaths in this one were even more brutal than the first one. And I love the meat cutter that characters
Kate,
get.
they were
Kate got
perfect.
when,
And which they showed us again in the opening recap, which
yes,
was funny.
that was so good. But the murders in this one, not only was there more, but they were way more gruesome. Like when he was standing over top of uh, one of the characters and just kept hitting them over and over and over. And then when he went in and all you could see was the kids and Nick going in to check on the Shady Side kids, and his hands are covered in blood because when Tommy left, inevitably he was covered in blood because an axe is a close quarters weapon. So that whole sequence, it just showing how graphic this could be. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen in the next one, because at the end of this movie, you saw them going back. You saw some aspects of that, and there was some guy walking in a church, with long hair, and it looked like a meat hook or something. And I was like, oh no! So I'm super excited to see what happens in this next one. But this, how graphic this one was, and the characters that they spent enough time, like you said, developing to make you care about them. So when they actually died, it was tragic. You're like, fuck.
We get introduced to Nurse Lane at the very beginning of the film, and they say her name several times, but we end up finding out that was Ruby's mother, the character we meet in the first film, who we know was a serial killer in the was it 50s or 60s?
I think it said 65.
Yeah, 65. You're right, and killed a whole bunch of 7 or 8 different, or 9, I can't remember, a whole lot of people. And of course, Ruby appears again at the end of this film. She comes out of the weird blob growth thing. We also start to see, so there's this red moss that goes underground, and we find out that the camp is on the site of where the settlement was, the original settlement. And this is where Sarah Fear, the witch, was killed. The underground portion, there's the tablet with the name, there's all the stones with the names carved into it, bunch of witch stuff. And then we have this sort of blob, very Silent Hill type thing, this flesh thing moving around, and that seems to be where the killers are coming out of, when they're manifested into flesh. But very gross, very cool, the way that all that's being done. And it reminded me a lot of Silent Hill, actually.
Well, yeah, like you said, the moss. I also like how they showed at the end, where they basically built a mall over top of it.
Yes, they built them all on that site. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, all these things that are tying together, it, I like the fact that it's going kind of bouncing back and forth between timelines. Now we'll see whether or not I like it still once the last one happens, but I do like how they're incorporating basically new stories, but still tying in to the old stories. Like I've really enjoyed how they've done that. And like you said, with the moss, and there's all these elements of, and it's not their fault. It's 2021 and movies have been around for a hot minute. So coming up with 100% new concept is damn near impossible. However, how they've done this concept, even though tying in of aspects of other things, feels very original. Like it's reminding me and reminiscent of other things, like you said, Goonies, or like when we said in the first one, The Scream. And there's aspects of it that remind you of other movies, but it's not so much so that you're like, well, this just feels like they're copying. It feels like they've come up with their own original kind of idea, even though it's picking parts of other things that we both enjoy.
The conclusion, so the final like 10 or so minutes is in the 1994 timeline, or what in the film verse, the present. And basically Ziggy is like, look, they come to the conclusion that they know where the hand is, they know where the body is because they found the body in the first film. And if you combine the two, that'll end it. Maybe that's the key. Turns out not necessarily. No, we don't know exactly what it means, but they get the hand from the tree, which, like we said, is in the mall now. They go back to the spot from the car accident in the first film. They combine them both, and Dina sitting there with her hand on it. Upon combining the hand back with the bones, all of a sudden Dina appears to be in 1666, and the question is, and we don't have the answer yet, is it in fact just reliving a memory? Because when she looks in the water, she sees a reflection of someone else. Then she sees herself and sort of goes back and forth. Is it simply a memory, or is she physically there and capable of changing history? Those are two very different things. Um, if it's just a memory, then maybe she'll learn the truth about what's going on and be able to use that knowledge to fix things in 1994. If she can physically change things, well, that's a whole different story. And I know you have some concerns about that being the case. What are your concerns?
Yeah, because we talked about that. Dog might be barking here in a second. Somebody like walked near my bedroom, but yeah, McGruff's super alert. He's gonna get him. But my concern is that we've talked about timelines, and Marvel's got all these timeline movies now, and DC's doing their Flash, point event or whatever. So my concern is that these two movies have been so violent, so graphic, and so good as far as horror movies go that they'll do an R.L. Stine where he was more of a young teen, like older teen reader, where they probably wouldn't push the envelope this far. And my fear is that she's going to go back in time. She's basically going to undo it where Sarah Fear no longer wants to kill all these people or create this curse. And then by the end of it, she's going to go back to 94, and you're going to end up having all these people back. Ziggy will have her sister back. Like all these people, Heather from the first movie will not be there. Ryan won't be a killer. He won't be shot in the head. And that's a huge fear of mine. But I do have a way for that to be okay. So, and we talked about it too. What I think, if they did a memory, it'd be great for them to just have her figure out how to break the curse. And then she comes back to the present, tries to break the curse. And then at the very end of the movie, it shows something where maybe the curse didn't break or it didn't take, and then it just rolls credits. Or say she's able to manipulate time. She's able to undo all this stuff. She comes back to the present, and all these people are back. The curse is broken. Everybody. The only person that I think that would believe her would be her brother, because he was, there during the other parts. But she brings back Sarah Fear with her, and then basically it starts over. So she becomes Sarah Fear at the end. That to me would be the only way that if she's able to manipulate the past for it to still be a good horror movie. Otherwise, like I'm just afraid that this is going to piss me off and it's going to ruin the first two. I I mean they're two of my out of all recent horror movies, they're two of my favorites. Like already, I've already watched both of them multiple times. Like,
Yeah, I mean the concern being that everything will be a happy ending and no one will have ever died, and yeah, I don't want that. I mean, if at the end of Friday the 13th, or you know, Jason Takes Manhattan, if somehow they were able to go in a time, back in time to the first film and none of it ever happened, and it's just like, well, what's the point? Um, but you could have a scenario with similar to Back to the Future where everything's great and you're like, we did it, we solved it, and then Doc comes back and he's like, oh, your kids. It's something bad happens, we got to go to the future. So what if, like, yeah, she solves it, but it it makes something else happen, or there's something worse coming, or whatever. And because I am curious if Netflix has any plans to continue these films, to do another trilogy or a single film, or will Fear Street become a location for future projects, because you've established. I mean, a character like Dina could stick around, or you could focus on another character, but maybe she's there and Josh is there and it's in the same world. Maybe skip ahead a year or two, 96 or whatever. I don't know.
well, to me, it depends on how it ends because I think if they go for the happy ending part, but then she becomes Sarah Fear, that would be a great way because now is basically going to start over. And all these people aren't going to be aware of what's going on. But now maybe she goes after Sunnyvale instead because they've been, these oppressive assholes for her whole life and all these things. And then she brings back Sarah Fear's memories with her and then she goes after them instead. So there's a lot of things that could make it end to where if you wanted to do more, you could. And if she comes back as Sarah Fear, you skip ahead 10 years and now all of a sudden she's like cursing other people or she's basically whatever that like Satan stone or whatever they called it, she's bringing forth that and she's conjuring stuff. So now Sunnyvale's had this sudden string of murders or whatever. I think that they could do it and continue it, do like a Saw franchise and do 19 movies, but I would actually like them to leave it kind of open ended and then just leave it. I would just love it as just a trilogy by itself without continuing it and kind of leave it open ended and not just in case, but to me that's the unknown, and that to me what makes a good horror movie is not closure. There's a lot of closure in a horror movie. I'm not necessarily on board with it because you're just like, all right, well, that's over. But that unknown, the fear of the unknown is a legit thing. And I think that plays very well into horror movie tropes.
Just quickly looking at the Fear Street novels, there were 51 original novels,
Holy shit.
and then I can't even count them of other series, all within the Fear Street verse or whatever you want to call it.
That would be great then. Just kind of do almost like a American Horror Story where
Exactly.
where each season's a little bit different. It's like an anthology series like True Detective or anything.
Because then there was The Return to Fear Street. There was Fear Street Super Chiller, which is 13 books. Fear Street Cheerleaders, which is 5. Fear Street Saga, which is 3. House of Evil, which was 3. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. So yeah,
that would be a great way to do it. Keep it going, but not rehashing the same story over and over.
Mm-hmm. And I believe they all exist within the same, similar like Goosebumps, which is like exists in the same. They'll reference other stories or characters or whatever. So yeah, this is a kind of story where, however it ends, I think it needs to sort of plant a seed or an idea that, the story's not necessarily over. There's more to come, because it would be a shame to not do more films. And like I said, this trilogy so far is pretty solid. The preview for the next one looks quite good. I also am curious to how they're going to end it, and if in fact it's going to, your fear of what you think might happen. It could happen that way. I don't know, but it'd be
Did
cool. I don't know if they could crank out these every year, but if we could get another film by next year or something, that'd be cool.
Did you ever watch Witch, the VVITCH?
I don't know.
Yeah, Anna Joy, the girl who was in Queen's Gambit, and a couple of. It's super unsettling, like the whole story, but it takes place back in, I want to say the 1500s, either 15 or 1600s, and it's very. When I watched this, the preview, it gave me that kind of vibe, and it was. That,
What'd you think about all the actors from the first two films being in it? I don't know if you noticed, like everyone.
yeah, I saw the faces.
Cade, and like Tommy, and
That's a concern. Like now, but it makes sense because think of yourself or me or anything. You hear a song and you attach memories to your song. You're interpreting it differently. So if she's seeing a memory, she's going to interpret it how she can, so she can relate it to herself. So if she sees this person, the only way she's going to remember that person throughout this memory is perhaps uh, attaching them to a bully in her situation, or somebody who she likes, or something like that. So the feeling she gets, maybe Sarah Fear likes, another person. She might put Sam's face on that because that's how she'll remember that person. So it makes sense. But
do you think they could just be representative of ancestors of the various characters?
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. But luckily, we don't have to wait long. That was another thing. Before we started recording, I brought up the fact that what's cool about this trilogy is, let's say, for argument's sake, it ended in a way and we didn't like it, and we're just like, sort of bums us out. We got to knock it out in 3 weeks. We didn't have to wait years and years for a completed trilogy. And if it's really good, and then, cool, we got this new awesome trilogy that we can rewatch. It does take place in October '94, though. I saw that in our calendar. That was a question I had last week. Yeah. So my guess is, after this third film, I don't. If Netflix was smart, they would do a somewhat of a push during the October, some like a Halloween thing, and be like, hey, watch our trilogy.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else? I do have one last thing. I appreciated that not only did this represent that kind of horror film, that camp horror film, and okay, we have all the blood and the gore. We have a guy running around with an axe. All the sort of high school drama. We also have the more adult scenes. More than one sex scene in this, which yet again all those old horror film, Friday the 13th films all had. And I didn't know if this series was going to do that, and they did. And so I appreciated yet again sort of the homage to that style of film.
I don't disagree, but the second one, when you knew the killer was out and loose, that one, I got less of that vibe. But the first one, I got a Wet Hot American Summer vibe, and it made me laugh. But
the second one, I was like, oh, you're gonna die. Like,
yeah.
This was that straight up Friday the 13th style thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you knew one of them was getting ready to get murdered, and you just was anticipating when it was going to happen.
But she had just, they had just finished. She's smoking a joint. I'm like, oh, you're doomed. Like, this is straight, Friday the 13th part 4, material. Or it's like, oh, you're done. And she was. So yeah, I don't have anything else. You have any other thoughts on
I just wanted to give
Part two.
a soundtrack. I praised the first movie soundtrack, but I looked up like when Cherry Bomb came out and Carry On My Wayward Son. So I was ensuring that they didn't take place after 78 because like Cherry Bomb I thought was really close, and same thing with the Carry On My Wayward Son, but they're both 76. So they're both really close. The David Bowie song, like all those songs were like 76, 77. So they did a great job with that, but not just the songs that I knew, but the score itself did a great job of making you feel uneasy, making you kind of tense up right before something happened. And I'm gonna have to look it up, whoever did these movies, but they did a great job with the scores. And I'm really interested because in the 1666, I mean, unless they're singing hymnals or something, there's not going to be a lot of songs that I'm going to recognize. But the score itself, this will be a great opportunity to see how well that they're able to put music together. So I'm really interested to see if the soundtrack is as good in the last movie as it has been in the first two.
Not sure who scored the films, but the director directed all three. It's her name is Leigh Janiak. I don't know if that's how you pronounce her last name. She directed all three films, and I was had looked that up specifically because I didn't think one person directed the whole thing, only for time reasons. Like that's a lot of shit to direct, but no, it's one director that did all three. She hasn't really done anything. Oh, she directed some episodes from the Scream series, so that makes sense. And Outcast. She directed an episode from Outcast. So she's horror. She's done some horror stuff.
The person who scored the films was Marco Belt Ramey. Belt Ramey.
And she did an episode of Panic. Like all horror. That's all she's done. Outcast, Scream, and Panic.
Oh shit. The composer did, let's see, I'm trying to see, said he did he did Man of Steel, A Good Day to Die Hard, Hell on Wheels, like a bunch of random stuff, but he did the Omen, he did Kingdom of Heaven, which I didn't know, he did a couple Dracula movies. He also did a couple of the Crow movies. He did.
Yeah.
Holy shit. He's the guy who did Scream. So that makes me.
It's funny how many Scream connections.
But those were parts that he like helped write. But as far as composing, he did A Quiet Place. He did Logan. Holy shit, he scored Logan.
Damn.
Yeah, so did a bunch of movies and several scary movies, but
yeah, this I'm assuming she will the director, I'm assuming she seems to like horror, so I would guess that unless she has some kind of deal with Netflix, that she'll probably do some kind of film or be able to get a big film from this. But she might have some kind of Netflix deal, maybe be doing more movies with them. I don't know.
I wouldn't be mad. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, like, we need new horror directors. There's a handful out there that are decent, but yeah, not as many as there were at one time. So, all right. Anything else?
Oh, I just looked. He did score all the Scream movies.
That's funny.
So it makes sense more now why it gives you that vibe.
Yep. And we're getting a new Scream movie in January, so there you go. But yeah, we'll look forward to next week. Hopefully it's as good as the first two, and we'll be able to smile and say, wow, amazing trilogy. Or not. We shall find out. All right. Yeah, we'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.